First of all, I would like to introduce our moderator this evening, who is our second vice chair, David Gonzalez, is here. He will be the moderator for this evening. Let me introduce to you the elected officials who are in attendance today. Representative Yvette Harrell, who led us in the prayer. And our current district attorney, Diana Martwick, who's also here. We also have, when I read this list, would you all please stand and remain standing? Roxanne Escobar, Diana Martwick, Yvette Harrell, oh, she's standing up already, Dion Kidd Johnson, Jean Crouch, Kathy Prather, Tim McGinn. I think, all right, ladies and gentlemen, these are some of your candidates running in Ontario. I'm sorry. Jean Crouch. I said Jean Crouch. Oh, he was already standing. These are your candidates for many different offices here in Ontario County. Please pledge to them, if nothing else, that you will get out and vote. That you will ask your friends, your neighbors, your loved ones, people you meet at Walmart, anywhere, that you will encourage them to get out and vote. It is such an important election year, and these people, all of these people, and those candidates who probably are not here tonight are probably hitting the streets, campaigning. They're probably doing something. I hope they're not out playing golf, but I hope they're doing something good to benefit themselves and our community. So please give each and every one of these people a round of applause for their hard work. Okay. You all can sit down now, it's my turn. So, once again, we're in the midst of a campaign season. We've got our big election on June the 5th. We have many great candidates that are running. Sadly, you can only choose one in each category. I've said this before, that there are no losers in this race. Most of these candidates have made new friends, have learned new things, have maybe changed their minds in some things, and have opened their minds to more things that you're telling them, which is a wonderful opportunity for them to learn. So don't hesitate to ever stop one of these candidates and let them know what you feel. Be respectful, but let them know how you feel, and let their minds broaden, and but also be mindful of their opinions and what they have to say as well. So I will. I just wanted to let me bring this up right quick. It is, as we speak right now, it is 4 weeks, 4 days, 12 hours, 47 minutes, and 12 seconds till the polls open on June the 5th. So please make sure that you all get out there and vote. Early voting begins early, May the 19th. Very good. We have people who pay attention to when early voting. Absentee voting starts May the 8th. On the back table, we have many of all the candidates, information applying to all the candidates and to the party. So please stop and pick up some of the information about the candidates, and particularly about our local party. We also have sample ballots back there, a big yellow sheet of a sample super ballot, as Ontario County calls it, and it has everybody listed in ballot order. This is what your ballot will look like when you go to the polls. So it may be something to take, something to mark up, make some notes on. That way when you go to vote, you'll have it in your head, you'll know it, and you can just kind of run with it. So David will explain the rules as we begin. If you did not pick up one of these as you came in, if you'll raise your hand, I'll make sure that you get a yellow sheet. David will explain it to you, and then we'll raise your hand and let me know if you didn't get one. So, all right, well, let's let the games begin then, shall we? Registrations, I can get out of my car. If you're not registered to vote, we can register you
Yeah, you guys should be receiving in the mail your voter ID cards. Yeah, so if you haven't got your voter ID card in the mail, then now's a good time if you move or change addresses or anything. So, all right. So I'm David Gonzalez, the second vice chair. Thank you, Rocky, for the introduction. Going to kind of go over the rules. A lot of you have been here already, been to these. Some of you are new, so we'll just go over them. The way we're going to go with this one is we're going to do introduction to the candidates, which is going to be 3 minutes. I'm going to flip a coin. I'm going to go by alphabetical order of last name, so you're going to call it. And whoever wins will have 3 minutes for the introduction. The next party, or whoever wins, will have another 3 minutes. We're going to go into the first round. It's going to be a 2-minute question or response, and then a rebuttal of 1 minute if it's needed. We're going to take a quick 5 to 10 minute intermission in between. You guys got white cards at the front there. These are where your questions are going to go. So please ask lots of questions. That's the best part of this. You guys get to ask the candidates the questions. So don't forget to fill those out as we're going through this whole deal if you have any questions. And after the 5 or 10 minute break, we'll gather these questions up. There's going to be a couple of us that will get together and weed out the duplicates and try to keep the ones that are fair for not targeted at one individual. So make your questions for both. Okay, that's kind of important, not just for one or the other. Sorry to ruin your day over there, sir. So we try to make it fair. Okay, and then the feedback forms that Rocky was talking about earlier. What these are for is these are feedback for us at the Republican Party and also for the candidates. What it asks you to do is just check who you might have been leaning towards whenever you got here. And then if one of these candidates swayed you during the whole process, you can check the other one, or if you stayed true, check that one as well. And then at the bottom, the feedback is for the candidates and for us. So for me, if I'm doing a terrible job today, I'm not feeling too well, but you can write it on the comment form there, and we'll try to do better next time. So thank you guys for picking those up and filling those out. All right. We're going to have a timekeeper. You're going to have a green card at 60 seconds to give you kind of a warning. You'll have a yellow card at 30 seconds, and then a red card will mean stop. And then I'll jump up and put you back in your chair, which I always look forward to. Yeah. Let's see, I think that pretty much covers everything, so let's go ahead and go with the coin flip.
Okay, this is sorry.
Yes, this is heads. Heads. Ready?
Heads.
And it's tails. So would you like to go first?
I'll let you go.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll start with our 3-minute introductions.
My name is Roxanne Escabel, and I'm running for District Attorney in the 12th Judicial District. Thank you to the Republican Party and to First National Bank for hosting this event here and giving us this opportunity to have this forum and to have an open dialogue, especially with the voters. I grew up in Southern California and I went to college there. I went to law school at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, graduating in 1982 when I passed the bar exam there. For the next 9 years, I was primarily a stay-at-home mom. My family moved to New Mexico in 1986, and I began my work as a prosecutor in October of 1991. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to be an attorney, but I didn't know that it was going to turn out to be a calling until I started working as a prosecutor. There, I realized that that was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to do. I started my career in the drug unit, where I stayed for about 6 years, and then I moved into violent crimes, and that's still what I'm prosecuting today. I have now celebrated over 20 years as a prosecutor. And that's been as a day in, day out, in the trenches, on the line prosecutor. And I've prosecuted over 300 felony jury trials. It was with a heavy heart in 2009 when I left this office that I had worked at for almost 18 years. And I left because I didn't like the direction that the office was headed. And I went to work at that time for Susana Martinez in the 3rd Judicial District, continuing my work in violent crimes as a prosecutor. And that's where I'm still working today, where I commute to and from work. And since I started working there, however, I continued to hear from people that worked in the system, law enforcement, and people in the community, how things were going over here. And that's why I decided to run for district attorney. What I will bring to the office of district attorney as your chief law enforcement officer is experience, leadership, and accountability. I'll bring my 20 years as a prosecutor to be able to exercise the decision-making and the judgment, set the standards and the policies, and mentor the newer attorneys. I will also be able to bring leadership. I've had management experience working both in Otero and Lincoln County. I'll be able to work effectively with law enforcement, and I will also bring accountability. Under my administration, we will answer the phone, return your calls, and answer your questions. And I expect you as the voters to hold any person that runs for political office accountable when they don't do what they promise to do. What I'm going to promise is to do the job that I'm elected to do, which is to prosecute cases. And I ask for your vote on June 5th. Thank you.
Are you starting to time me now?
Oh, she's tired.
Okay.
I don't have the time. I got the easy job.
Just checking. All right. My name is Dinah Martwick. I'm running for re-election for district attorney. What you should know about me is that law has been my life. It has been my calling my entire life. I went to law school at the University of Denver on an academic scholarship. I scored in the top 10% of this country for law school entrance exams. In addition to that, I was on the University of Denver's trial team. There was only 4 of us, and we won the regional competition. So I won the regional ATLA, this American Trial Lawyers competition, where I got to go argue in DC for that. My experience, well, first of all, I'm the only candidate here that has private experience in the real world. In other words, I had my own business here in this community for over 6 years. I also have helped run my parents' business. My family has farming businesses out in California. So I'm not a career government employee. I've just worked out there in the real world, and that's the experience that I bring into this office. In addition, I'm the only candidate here who is not set to retire really soon. As a matter of fact, I have another 20 years or more to go to give this community before my retirement, and I want you to know that I'm invested in this community. We have a small child, we are on a sports team, we go to church here, and I've never left or abandoned this community here, even when I wasn't happy with the direction the DA's office was going in when I left in 2001. I still stayed here. I didn't leave for greener pastures and more money, and I just stayed in this community. I'm a constitutional DA. I believe in protecting your rights, and I won't do whatever somebody wants me to do, even if it's somebody from law enforcement asking me to do something that I think is constitutionally not correct. I believe in our Constitution. I believe in your Second Amendment right to bear arms. I have never applied for and received a gun grant to pick up guns from our citizens like the previous District Attorney's Office administration did. In fact, I returned that money because I didn't want to go do that. My opponent claims here that I don't have a good relationship with law enforcement. I think that if you talk to them in the community, that they'll tell you I always answer my phone and I'm willing to go anywhere at any time. As a matter of fact, in the last 2 days alone, I have provided investigative support for them on 4 large cases alone. I'm the only candidate that has experience with complex litigation and additionally in other areas of law other than criminal law. This wealth of experience is helpful to law enforcement and to our county commissioners. As a matter of fact, I'm also the only candidate that has a specialization on my law degree in environmental law. I had thought I was going to go in that direction and actually found that I loved criminal law more. My opponent claims that she didn't like the direction the office was going. Quite frankly, when I entered the office, we were so far behind, I'd like to get into that a little bit more today, from cases being continued and continued, that it took more than a year after she left to even catch up to have room to breathe. So I would just tell you that we didn't really have a direction at that time. We were just trying to catch up. On June 5th, that I ask that you vote for me. I'm the leadership that this office needs. Please vote for me on June 5th. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go into the first question phase. These questions are come up by the Republican Party committee. We try to pick some good questions to kind of get the ball rolling for everybody. Again, the format's going to be 2 minutes to answer the question for each of you, and then a 1-minute rebuttal if anybody so chooses. Since Roxanne led off with the speeches, Diana, you'll go first on the question.
Okay.
All right, this is a little bit of a long one, so if I need to repeat it, please let me know and I'll repeat it. Do you believe sobriety checkpoints are constitutional? Do you think they are a deterrence? What are your thoughts on the constitutionality of the checkpoints?
That's a good question. I do have a problem with the sobriety checkpoints as far as they stop people on the road that, do I need to come up there? I'm sorry.
Can everybody hear her okay?
I'd like her to go
Oh,
up
she's
there.
got the camera.
Camera.
So for now we're live, let's go ahead. Let's reset.
Okay.
Let's reset.
Okay. I'll come right up.
And I was also told that my phone's blocking my head. As much as they didn't want to see me, they didn't want to see you.
Okay, I do have a problem with the sobriety checkpoints, and one of the problems I have is that you can just be driving on the road, minding your own business, and they actually stop you. However, I don't think that our Supreme Court has declared them unconstitutional. As a matter of fact, I think that in some cases they're allowed. However, our current sheriff has been very, I would say, reluctant to use those means of force. But I myself was stopped at a sobriety checkpoint on my way home from work one day, because often I don't leave the office till 8 o'clock at night. So I was actually stopped on my way home and asked if I had anything to drink. No, I didn't, and asked to provide proof of my identification. I don't really think it's fair to the citizens that are minding their own business. I understand, though, that New Mexico probably ranks still number 2 in the amount of drunk drivers in the state of New Mexico. And what they're really trying to do is avoid people losing their lives on the road. And so you have to remember that there's a greater community purpose with that. However, I would just tell you that I'm not a big fan of the checkpoints. Thank you.
I do think that the sobriety checkpoints serve a very valuable purpose, both in deterrence and in catching individuals who are driving drunk before they have the opportunity to get into a crash that injures or kills someone that's innocently driving down the road. They have been held to be constitutional as long as they're conducted in accordance with the standards set forth in Las Cruces versus Betancourt, which is the leading case on the subject. And that includes advertising that you're going to be doing checkpoints, which gives people an opportunity to know they're going to be doing checkpoints, and they perhaps have an opportunity to not get stopped in a checkpoint if they keep that in mind, and also certainly have the opportunity to not be caught in a checkpoint driving drunk if they know that they're going to be conducted. I would support checkpoints as long as they're conducted in accordance with the current case law, and I do believe that they serve a valuable purpose.
All right, any rebuttal?
I don't need any rebuttal.
I was just reminded that we had lawyers here today, so we're actually going to go with the rebuttal to the rebuttal, which would be 30 seconds if you guys decide to do that.
So we get a serve rebuttals and rebuttals.
Sorry, I'm still in my first year of law school. All right, so the next question will go to Roxanne. Well, to both, Roxanne first. If you could change or rewrite one law, what would it be and why?
That's a really good question, and there are so many laws that I've thought about that I think need to have some revisions to them. One of the ones that comes up pretty frequently is the sex offender registration law. In fact, there was a recent case that was overturned out of Las Cruces where an individual was prosecuted for not registering here in New Mexico. And I won't get into the long, boring analysis of the case, but basically the bottom line of it was that the interpretation of our statute, based on the crime that this individual was convicted of, was not considered to be one of the things on our list. I think if I had an opportunity to change that law, I would simply write it so that if you're convicted in another state and you move here, you have to register. Why make New Mexico a haven for sex offenders? That's just one of many things that I've thought about and contemplated over the years that just comes immediately to mind.
We're lawyers here to ask us to change one law, and I'm sure that probably my opponent would agree with me on these. First of all, I did rewrite the sexual offender registration law, and we did submit that to the legislature. Unfortunately, They didn't like that. What we were trying to do is prevent people from coming out of state with a different classification of offense from not having to register in this state, because that's currently the way the law exists, and that needs to be changed. In addition to that, I also had written legislation where violent offenders, such as murderers who were found to be mentally incompetent, weren't sent up to Las Vegas and released within 30 days. I think that they should be evaluated yearly, and that a judge should order the release of these people, much like, and the easiest way for me to describe that is the John Hinckley case. You know, John Hinckley's been put away a long time. We in New Mexico currently have no way to do that, so we need to change that, and it's something that, unfortunately, we have a very liberal legislature, so this didn't get done yet. I've also recently asked to change a portion of the synthetic marijuana law where the children are placed on probation and a fine only. A fine and community service only, which means that when they are caught with possession or trafficking of this, all I can do basically is give them community service and a fine, and we need to be able to place them on probation and put them in our version of drug court, which is the NET program. So this is an important change that needs to happen, and I put that on the DA's agenda for this summer. Thank you.
Okay, the next question will go to Diana first.
Okay.
The Sixth Amendment guarantees an accused individual the right to a speedy trial. Explain what that is, and should DAs be held accountable by printing a list of lost cases in the newspaper?
Yeah, speedy trial is basically, the right of the accused to be brought to trial in a timely fashion, and it's different in various states. In New Mexico, we have to determine whether it's a simple or medium or complex case in order to determine what the time limits of that case are. And so that's basically the way it works in this state. In some states, the time limits can be really short. They can be 4 months. As a matter of fact, in federal court, I think they tell me normally they're under like a 4-month timeline, and I know that Nevada's that way. Our state is more lenient. For simple cases, 12 months. For a medium case, we have, I think it's, I'm trying to remember if it's 15 months and then 18 months. But we do keep track of that on our list, and I do think that we should be held accountable for that. As a matter of fact, the first time I ran, I had a whole list of cases, felony cases that had been dismissed right before the time limits, that they had basically lost in time and then dismissed. We've lost very few cases to time limits during the time of my administration, which is why we were so busy, because we had to do a lot of catch up on the backlog. The backlog used to be about 18 cases deep, and we're trailing about 8 cases deep. So, that's one thing that I'm proud of during my administration, is that we've been able to get rid of some of that backlog in the court system so we can keep these cases moving. An impediment to that is our New Mexico crime lab. They have cut the crime lab, and so they can't get their evidence tested in a timely fashion. And sometimes they can't bring the witnesses down when we need them. And surely that does affect some of our cases. I know that Ms. Escobar probably affects some of her cases as well. And that is a problem, especially getting places like the Office of Medical Examiner to cooperate with us. They've had some of their examiners leave for Australia and New Zealand and England, and we have to bring them back, and it's very expensive. Thank you.
The speedy trial analysis is really quite complicated, and a simple case is 12 months. I believe an intermediate case is 18 and a complex case is 2 years. And what happens is you don't even begin to look at whether there's an issue with speedy trial until you get to that point. And then a lot of analysis goes into effect based on primarily a federal case, Barker versus Wingo. And you analyze what was the cause of the delay, what was the reason for the delay, and whether there was any prejudice. Now, when my opponent was running in the last election, there were a lot of issues raised about whether cases were lost on the 6-month rule. Totally different rule, totally different analysis. We no longer have the 6-month rule. Our Supreme Court has abandoned it, and now we only look to speedy trial. So that's really not, it's kind of would be comparing apples and oranges to look at perhaps how many cases may have been lost in the past. versus how many cases may be lost today. I'm certainly not opposed to the idea of putting the facts out there in the paper as to what's happening in the district attorney's office. I think citizens can get on the computer and look up cases and see what's happened on them. And I'm not opposed to the idea of a court watch group. I think that would be a really useful thing for people in the community to know what's really happening in the courtroom. Now, as far as whether any backlog has been cleared up, that's a little bit hard to analyze because you would have to look at how many cases are being filed now, for example, in district court versus how many were filed a year or 2, 3 years ago. I think you'd see, if you looked at the facts, fewer cases are being filed now. So you can't just simply compare how many cases are remaining. And I do know, though, that there are still people that have been in jail a really long time. I think the person that's been in jail the longest has been there for over 4 years, and there's been one that's been in jail for over 3. And so there's still some cases that take a while to get to court. What's not in the DA's control all the time is whether a case gets continued. I know I've argued against continuance a lot of times, and they've still been granted. And so speedy trial is very complicated, but I'm not opposed to putting the information out there.
One minute on the rebuttal.
And then she has her server. I just want to say I agree with her on the court watch group. I think that that would be a great idea. I'm not opposed to any of that. One of the things I'd like to explain about people being in jail for a long period of time is, as she explained, sometimes defense has continuances. It's very hard sometimes to get defense counsel there. And in addition to that, we have some people that are in there right now on mental competency issues. And the problem is, we do an evaluation. Then by the time we get the defense attorney into court, the court wants another evaluation to determine whether or not they're competent to stand trial. So these people can go through 3 or 4 competency evaluations. And part of that is because the court is very reluctant to grant somebody that they're actually incompetent to stand trial, because we lost a few years ago the guilty but mentally ill verdict, which was the John Hinckley fix, which now means that if they're declared incompetent, they're going to go up to Las Vegas and get out in about 30 to 60 days. So we try as hard as we can to find them competent. Thank you.
John Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Guilty but mentally ill verdict, someone was still found guilty, but they were supposed to receive treatment for their mental illness in prison. So that's really a kind of 2 different issues.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys a little heads up on this one. This next question will be for Roxanne, and I'll tell you right now, it has one of the dreaded bill numbers in there. Okay. So it has HB 117, which was passed in 2009. It's the Children in Meth Houses bill. Okay, has HB 117, part of the child abuse statute, helped your office prosecute offenders? Has it helped lower the burden of proof? You guys got that one? Okay.
Personally, I mean, referring to the office that I'm currently working in, it hasn't really had any impact on our office because we're always prosecuting cases, child abuse cases, against individuals that had meth in their homes and were using it around their children, and we've continued to do that. I think the question about whether it's lowered the burden of proof is always beyond a reasonable doubt. I do think that it has a presumption in there which can be overcome, which is basically there's a presumption that it's child abuse if they're using methamphetamines in the residence. And I suppose if you were to file a case under that theory, it could be somewhat helpful, but you would still have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt.
That bill was done by Nora Espinosa because I actually helped her and Bobby write that because they couldn't get that bill through. We have a very liberal legislature, and they were actually against child abuse for children in meth houses. I don't understand why, but one of the things we came up with is it's prima facie evidence of child abuse, which means we shifted the burden on the defendant to have to prove that, but we still have a high burden of proof. So it doesn't really make our job a lot easier, but one of the things that we did is there was a high-intensity drug trafficking disc that I got, and I got a presentation on that for law enforcement officers on how to prove these cases easier, like you're supposed to measure where the drugs are at and the children's access to the drugs, and I actually do think that that'll make it a little bit easier to prosecute, and there is a slightly shifted burden, which does make our job a little bit easier, but we still have to prove our case ultimately at the end of the day beyond a reasonable doubt. This case actually arose out of a case around here where children were placed in that environment and a child died. And so Nora feels very, Nora's passionate. You all know Nora, right? She's passionate about that. So that was one of her bills that year to get through. And we did get it passed through a very liberal legislature that's far more liberal than it is today. So I'm proud of her for that.
All right, so we're gonna do something a little bit different also. I'm gonna throw you guys another curveball here. Diana, you're gonna be going first on this one.
Okay.
Okay, I need you guys to get a piece of paper and a pen. Get it ready?
Yeah.
Spell chrysanthemum. Just kidding. Okay.
Can we get our cell phones off for
Yeah, that's
spelling?
I was hoping somebody asked me to use it in a sentence. Okay, what you guys are going to do is, I need you guys to take 30 seconds, and you guys are going to write a question to ask the opponent. Okay? So 30 seconds, you guys ready? Go.
I didn't finish writing my questions.
Well, you can ask it. You've got it in your head. Okay, so, okay, you get to ask it. I'm going to come up here and ask it.
Sure.
2 minutes. Same format. No, I think it's just one for the other, so you get to ask your own question.
You have to answer the question.
You don't have to, I suppose.
I would like Ms. Margaret to explain why she did not follow through on her campaign promises to decrease the turnover in the district attorney's office and do a better job of trial preparation and have fewer acquittals.
Hey, counselor.
Okay, I know the bill. That's the one. Okay, first of all, the turnover in the DA's office. She says that was a campaign promise. I mean, there was a high turnover in the DA's office. One of the problems that they had under the previous administration, unfortunately these questions take time to answer, so I have to answer them, is that they would actually at sometimes let them get down to just 5 lawyers in the office, and we currently have 13 and a half positions. So it's really hard to prosecute cases when you don't recruit well. What I've done under my administration is a great job of recruitment. She claims that there's been all this turnover. I think she's counting volunteers that we use and college students that come in for a brief period of time. And you know what? I don't intend to stop that. Those weren't the people that I was counting in the first place. And I have looked at the turnover in her office. The turnover in her office has actually been higher than in my office. And in addition to that, I looked at the turnover in the 5th Judicial District Attorney's Office, which is also at least the same or if not higher than my office. I have listed the people that have left in both of those offices. So I would just point out that our turnover is at least no higher or no less than any other office. One of the biggest problems I have is we have a lack of money here. In Las Cruces, for example, the Chief Deputy District Attorney makes $110,000. My jurisdiction, he makes $87,000. One of our attorneys here with about 5 years of trial experience left, and he makes $87,000. He makes $88,000, which is more than my chief deputy. And you know, it's hard to compete with a jurisdiction that's 1 hour away when the salaries are so disparate. What we need as DAs is a unified budget and money to be paid across the board to everyone so that one jurisdiction, I'm sorry I don't have time to answer all of this, but so that one jurisdiction, I want to make sure I answer what I do. because they keep telling me not to, to hurry up. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're like the public defender's office and like the courts, where you have these salaries across the board, because it does make it hard. Unfortunately, for 12 years, we were under the administration of Scott Key, and we didn't go up and we didn't get the money. Susana Martinez did a great job. She's a great governor for our state, and she got money for her office. For example, her CFO makes $20,000 more than mine. So there's a huge income disparity, and it's hard sometimes to compete when there's more money out there. I want to answer the rest of it if I get a chance.
Another problem is a high turnover rate in the current administration. That needs to change. Diana Martwick, Alamogordo Daily News, 4/12/2008. That was a campaign promise, and under her administration, there's been a turnover of 32 employees. That is not volunteers and interns. I have the names right here, and I would be happy to provide them to the Alamogordo Daily News after we're done here. And she wants to compare it to the turnover in the Las Cruces DA's office. Well, did Susana Martinez do a good job, or did she do a bad job? Because that's who she's campaigning against, apparently, is Susana Martinez and Amy Orlando, not me. She promised to have lower turnover. It's dramatically increased. And when there's instability in an office, that makes it really hard for victims and law enforcement to work effectively.
Again, I'll just say that 35 people have left her office that she's currently working in. As a matter of fact, I counted like 12 attorneys that had just left the Roswell office, and I know that I don't have a complete list, but I'll just tell you that our turnover is no different than anyone else. We're a military community. People come, people go, and the DA's office is a training ground. What I have tried to do under my administration to keep my promise is, instead of paying really high salaries to a few people and just keeping a few low-end attorneys and doing zero recruitment, I've tried to recruit and create a mid-range in our office for a future for your community.
Okay, Diana, now you can ask your question.
I couldn't really think of anything I wanted to ask her, so the only thing I could think of is, do you believe in the stacking of charges?
What? We didn't hear the question.
Stacking of charges, when you charge somebody with more than what they actually did to try to get a plea of what you wanted.
Well, if that's how you're going to define it, then no, I don't believe in charging someone with more than they actually did. I think sometimes in certain types of cases it can be difficult to determine the exact number of charges. One thing that comes to mind is child sexual abuse cases. A lot of times a victim will make a late report, and they will indicate in their interview that something happened on a certain frequency, so many times a week, every day, so many times a month. And it can be difficult to analyze how to charge that. There's been some recent case law that has suggested that a previous practice, not in this jurisdiction alone, but in many other jurisdictions, of charging 2 times a week for 2 years, maybe is not going to be able to be done because of the proof requirements that the court's now requiring. I think you have to take that into account now when you're charging a case like that. You have to try to narrow it down as much as you can and try to file the number of charges that are going to be there ultimately. But I do think that you can't just file one count when through the report of the victim and perhaps other evidence that this is something that's been happening every day. That does not reflect the seriousness of what happened in the case. And I think we have a responsibility to hold the offender accountable for everything that they've done.
I'll just say that I don't believe in the stacking of charges. I think people need to be charged with what they did under our constitutional and under our Constitution and our case law. And I think this is important because and I think Ms. Escobar and I disagreed on that at some points in time, because there's a case out there called the Tafoya case, which basically says exactly what she said, but there were cases that were charged after the Tafoya case came down, where cases were charged where the victim couldn't remember dates, times, or places, and there has to be a certain amount of information to survive that constitutional scrutiny. So I want to charge what we can prove according to our Constitution, and that's what I pledge to do for you.
actually going to conclude our RPOC questions. So now's the time where you guys can get your white index cards out and come up with some good questions. There's going to be a basket in the back there. Just put them upside down in that basket, or we'll collect them from you later on. Thank you. We got 5 to 10. Okay, we had a lot of questions submitted, and I made a pretty big mistake earlier on that's going to probably change some things. I kind of feel like the guy from the Hunger Games that keeps changing the rules on everything. And might not invite me back. I had said earlier that we weren't going to ask individual questions. We had quite a few individual questions, so we tried to divide them out to go to individuals. What I didn't realize or didn't think about was that you're an incumbent, and you're the first one that we've had so far through the debates. So that's why they felt it would be, that's where I misspoke, and that we would do questions, directed to individuals. Okay. So, I'm not sure how we're going to do the format though. You went first on the last question, so Roxanne, you'll be first on these questions. Okay. This question is directed at you directly. Straight at it directly. The deputy prosecutors handle a large volume of important cases in the DA's office. Their work helps to define the philosophy and effectiveness of the DA if elected. What personal changes, if any, will you make among the current staff of lawyers in the office? That's a long one to get. Okay.
After June 5th, 2012, I will personally be meeting with all of the employees at the office, attorneys and staff, if they will meet with me prior to the change on January 1st, and talk to them about what they're currently doing, what they would like to do, what changes they would like to see, and then I will evaluate their experience and their suitability to work under my administration and my philosophy. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to stand here today and say, well, I'm going to fire this person, I'm going to hire that person. I haven't made any decisions with regard to that. What I will tell you is the people that I will appoint as my deputies and chief deputy will be people that do have experience and who have a similar philosophy to mine, people that I can rely on and trust to represent me and all of us effectively in court.
You can say something to that if you'd like to. So this question is going to be for you, Diana. Can you explain why you've had an employee hired since August of last year, 2011, in a lead investigator's position when that person does not meet the minimum requirements established by the administration of the district attorney? This person is not a certified police officer as required.
Yes, I can. When you look at our list, and if you're not experienced with the state system, people have job titles, but there's underfills in categories. So that person is not filled as a lead investigator, but is sitting in a spot that was open. At some point in time, I'd like to go to the legislature and actually change that to program specialist, which is really what this person is. But just to speak about this person's level of experience, they worked for Susana Martinez for a number of years doing investigations. So I do think that they're qualified to do the investigations. They do help us with our elder abuse cases and with the gang task force. She is also managing the pre-prosecution diversion program. She has a college degree, and so she's qualified to be in that position. And as a matter of fact, the district attorney's office, the district attorneys right now in our personnel and compensation plan are actually changing the requirements for lead investigator to make them not have to be a certified police officer. And at that time, we could even look at something else for this person. The reason being is that once they decided that you couldn't double dip in the system, so we couldn't hire like a 30-year, retired police officer, and they have to actually suspend their retirement to come work for me. So that's not like a great deal for them. The other thing is I have a 30-year retirement plan, so who wants to come from a 20-year retirement plan to a 30-year retirement plan? That's not real attractive to police. So a lot of the DAs are having trouble getting anyone to fill this category. So that requirement is going to be changing pretty soon, and I know that you're meeting, I think they're meeting next month on that. But she is not, she's actually an underfill in that position, so she's not filled in that position. We have other people that are underfills in their position too, but when you print them out on the case list, they'll show up as like lead investigator. I don't have any control over the way the state prints that out. But when I fill them on our chart that prints out, you can tell that they're not actually in that position. Thank you. It's a position number.
I'm actually familiar with the individual that Ms. Mark was talking about, and she actually did not work as an investigator in the DA's office in the 3rd. But I understand her point that this individual is an underfill. However, I don't think it's really appropriate to have a person conducting investigations and anticipate that maybe they'll have to be going to court to testify who isn't a certified law enforcement officer and doesn't have that kind of experience and training. I think we have to exercise a little more creativity in going out and recruiting and finding people that want to work in that capacity. Perhaps we can get some people that would rather work in a DA's office than in whatever current law enforcement agency they're working in, and don't really mind dealing with the longer retirement system. I think that it's also important to note that there hasn't been an investigator in Lincoln County, which maybe doesn't impact you all so much, since almost the very beginning of the current district attorney's term. And I think it's important for the district attorney to have their own investigator in both counties.
First of all, that person is putting together financial documentation, so they won't be testifying in court. They're just assisting law enforcement in that regard. But in addition to that, I would just point out that as far as the Lincoln County investigator slot went open, we had about 20% of our positions vacant due to budget cuts. It's just what happened, and we had to focus on what we did. So we covered both counties from here, but currently, the good news is I got money to return from the legislature, so we have a candidate that will probably be hiring in Lincoln. We might be interviewing some more people, but we are on the move to get that slot filled very, very quickly. Thank you.
Okay, this question is going to go to both of you guys. Diane, you'll be the first one to answer on this one. It's your turn. Please explain the term jury of your peers, including how they are seated and what their responsibilities are. I should be selected also.
Okay. I think that comes from one of our conservative folks. Okay, let me just go back. The history of jury of your peers. That was initially actually supposed to be people that knew you. That's what it meant when the criminal law system is actually established. Over time, lawyers have decided that it can't be anyone that knows anything about the case or knows you or anything at all, because a jury of your peers was truly somebody that knew somebody that was actually on trial and would know their character and their judgment. And the system probably worked pretty good back then. Since that time, they've decided that they don't want to go off voter registration records anymore. We go off a driver's license record. So we can get somebody that truly knows absolutely nothing about anything in there, which is great for defense counsel, but it's hard for us because sometimes we have to educate the people. For example, in one of my huge cases, the paper that day printed a detailed analysis of the case, which basically kicked off everyone in the jury that had read the paper. They said they couldn't put it out of their minds. It was terrible for us because I felt that they kicked off a bunch of the educated members of our jury. But a jury of your peers was supposed to be people that knew you. Now it's people from the driver's registration records.
Basically, what jury of your peers means today is people from your community. That's essentially what it means today. And people are randomly selected by driver's license, and that's also an important aspect of the jury of your peers is people that are randomly selected. Although when you talk to some people, you have to wonder how random it is, because some people seem to get jury summonses all the time and other people never get any, so it's supposed to be random. In terms of the jury's responsibility is to decide the case based on the facts and the evidence they hear in court, and then they apply that to the law and make their determination based on that. They are not supposed to decide it on anything that they may have heard outside hopefully by the time you get down to your actual jury, you weeded out all the people who have information, outside information about the case. They're not supposed to talk to their friends or family about the case they're sitting on if it's more than one day. And they are not supposed to be swayed by sympathy, and they're not supposed to speculate. In the ideal perfect world, you would get someone as a juror who didn't know anything about the case. That doesn't mean they don't know anything. It just means they don't know anything about the case. It's people that will be fair and impartial and will decide the case purely based on the evidence they hear in court.
Okay, this is for both again, and Roxanne, you'll go first. The number one priority in the district attorney's office, starting from whenever you're reelected or you take over, what would it be?
Well, I plan on January 1st, 2013 to have in place my organizational chart and how I'm going to restructure the office. I plan to have some policies and procedures already determined. And the number one priority will be to meet and talk with all the employees, to let them know what kind of standards we're going to have in the office, that we expect excellence, professionalism at all times, and that one of their jobs in working for me, an elected official, is to be a good public servant, to be a good steward, and to be always courteous and respectful to people that call or come by the office, or even when they're just out and about in the community. But overall, my number one goal starting my term will be to gather experienced people that will be able to effectively prosecute cases. That's the number one job of the district attorney. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question? What we're going to...
What your number one priority is?
Priority is, okay. The number one priority has been for me and will continue to be for, first of all, I would like to thank you for the last 3 years of service. It has been a pleasure, and the greatest joy in my life is being a public servant for you all. The number one priority in my office will continue to be doing justice. And you know what justice is? You know, everyone knows what doing the right thing is. It doesn't change no matter what day of the week it is, or whether it's sunny or rainy outside. It's just doing the right thing. And what I try to impress upon my staff is that it's not about getting a conviction. It's about doing the right thing and what you know in your heart is right. And that's really the number one priority. In addition to that, I would just point out that the protocols and procedures are already in place. As a matter of fact, during my administration, we've created a huge policy manual that didn't exist previous to that. That's about this thick, to help the legal secretaries do their job and for the people to see what's going on and what the specific office policies are. Because even if you have a personnel manual, it's not according to your current policies. So that's important. But, you know, we can't forget that what we're here to do, being a prosecutor has been the greatest joy in my life. And I'll tell you why, is you get to wear the white hat. You can't say that in front of a jury because that's a mistrial, okay? But truly, you just get to do the right thing. And there's nothing better than getting up every day and just doing the right thing for people. Thank you.
Okay, this next question will be for Diana first. Given the current budget constraints on our law enforcement officers, how do you plan, or how would you plan, to go after corruption? And how would you choose whom to prosecute and whom not to?
Okay, well, first of all, as far as the corruption, you know, corruption is an important priority it needs to go after. And, you know, and if it's with one of our local law enforcement agencies, it should be referred out to another agency. I mean, the closest thing I can come to is there was an attorney that was prosecuted here, you know, but we didn't do the investigation. It was sent out and was prosecuted by Matt Chandler. So if that's something that needs to happen, that's what's going to happen. If we feel like it's a conflict with what we do every day to work with this agency, to investigate them. But corruption is a high priority in New Mexico. It's a high priority on our governor's docket, and I intend to support her in that regard, in whatever she intends to do. As a matter of fact, at the legislature, we actually, to assist law enforcement, tried to create a corruption unit. And would you believe they were not for it? So therefore, I know, who would have ever guessed? So therefore, unfortunately, it did not pass. And so it's unfortunate because, you know, we in New Mexico have so few law enforcement officers per square mile that it's hard to get everything done. And we have more violent crimes happening than ever. I mean, you guys see how the murders come down. We used to have like one murder every 2 years, and now it's like one murder every couple of months, and that's just the beginning of it. So we're busy, but we need help. And I would like to see the governor's corruption unit go forth, and I'm fully in support of that.
If I had evidence of corruption among law enforcement brought to my attention, I would immediately respond to investigate that. I think it would depend on the situation, whether that needed to be referred out to another agency or not. I know that the office I currently work in is involved in prosecuting a whole lot of public officials in Sunland Park, and that case is being prosecuted by the 3rd Judicial District. I do think it involves a former law enforcement officer as well. So I think it's a case-by-case basis whether you need to refer it out at the office. Thank you.
Okay, this next one's for Roxanne. We know lawyers like to talk. Signed, Captain Obvious. And both of you are strong, intelligent, educated attorneys. However, in one sentence, what distinguishes you from your opponent? One sentence only. Exclamation points. Yes, you're first. I want the grammar in there.
I heard to spell chrysanthemum.
I've been doing the right thing for 20 years, and I have the actual real-world experience doing the right thing in order to ensure you that I will do that after I'm elected. Thank you.
I think that how we're brought up often says how we are, and I'll just tell you that I was taught to do the right thing, and I'm going to continue to do the right thing. I've tried to do the right thing in every circumstance, and that's what I intend to do. Thanks. That's one sentence, isn't it? Kind of.
It's one breath, not one
Okay, this next one is going to go to Diana. How do you feel about alternative sentencing, especially with drug offenders?
Well, I think my record proves that I do believe in that. And we need to distinguish drug users from the drug traffickers, okay, because they need to go to jail for a long period of time so they don't sell drugs to your kids. But I was involved when the drug court program shut down here in Otero County with helping the Juvenile Probation and Parole Office and all of our community services get together to create the network to empower teens so these kids did not fall through the cracks. I donate my time every other Wednesday to this program and try to become mentors to these children. So I think my record proves that. In addition, in some cases, we've allowed drug offenders to be accepted to our pre-prosecution diversion program. That's for worthy individuals that admit what they did was wrong. They go through probation with my office, which is not easy, but if they do complete it, then they do not have a felony conviction on their record. I thought this was especially important because under our previous president and under President Bush, they've decided that if a person over the age of 18 has a drug conviction, that they can no longer get a student loan. And we actually had some juniors in college that were caught with like possession of marijuana, and actually that would have stopped them from ever getting their college degree. The greater societal purpose is that we rehabilitate these people and we get them back to work. And so that's what I believe in. Thank you.
I think there already are a lot of opportunities for individuals convicted of drug offenses to have alternative sentencing, and I assume the question would include alternative sentencing that does not involve going to prison. I was a drug prosecutor for 6 years. Very rarely did anyone ever go to prison when they were convicted of a first offense felony drug case. It didn't matter if they had half a gram of cocaine or 50 pounds of marijuana. It's just very, very unusual. So the myth that everyone's going to prison is just not accurate. I think what happens, though, is when you give people an option of not going to prison, you put them on probation, and if they don't follow their probation, there has to be a consequence. And you can't just say, well, we're going to keep putting you back on probation over and over and over again. Believe me, word gets out. And pretty soon, people, realize that nothing's going to happen to them if they commit a crime. I think there's alternatives now, such as drug court. I'm a big fan of drug court. However, I am not a big fan of putting people that commit felony-level drug offenses in pre-prosecution diversion. I think that might be fine for misdemeanor-type offenses, but I'm not in favor of it with felony-level offenses. And I think that the DA's offices are just not equipped to handle the supervision requirements of someone with a major drug problem. Now, as far as stiff sentences for drug traffickers, I think if you look at the record of the current office, I don't think you're going to find a lot of stiff sentences being handed out. I think Rick Ramsdale, who was a police officer that was convicted with I believe a kilo of cocaine, got probation. And recently, Jacob Nahara, second offense, had a prior felony conviction, convicted of trafficking cocaine, probation.
I guess I can. Speaking about the Rick Ramsdale case, I had to personally argue that myself. You can look at my argument online. I argued for him to go to jail. The judge did not agree. He cried. And she agreed to put him on probation. It was a sad case because he's a police officer, okay? And I believe that when you're a police officer, that you should definitely be held to the color of law, and that he should be held to a higher standard than the rest of us. The scary thing is he worked for us undercover for a number of years. God only knows where he got those drugs from because we tried to figure it out. I think he could have stolen them out of evidence, but he claims he didn't. He could have ripped him off a drug dealer for all that we know. But my point is that was not a sentence that was handed out by the DA's office. You need to look at your judges and you need to elect them accordingly. Read the argument online because I said all that. Thank you.
Okay, this next question is for Roxanne first. Can you explain specifically what goes into writing a bill or a piece of legislation? How do you write it and who helps you, that type of thing?
That's a very interesting question because I don't think it's the job of the district attorney to write legislation. I think that's the job of our legislature. I think the DA's office can certainly have input and ideas of what types of laws need to have changes. I think that we can do bill analysis and review legislation to see if we think that it's a good idea or not and make recommendations. But I don't think it's my job to go up to Santa Fe for a month or two and write bills for the state legislature. That's their job. They have staff, and that's my answer.
All I'll say is that if she gets elected, I hope she reconsiders that. I've never been up to Santa Fe for a month or two, but legislators do call me and they ask me for help on things, and I think it's my duty as your public servant to provide that help. One of the things you have to remember is that at the legislature, there's a bunch of defense attorneys. There are no prosecutors. There are 14 of us in the state of New Mexico that can fight for justice for the police officers and for ourselves to make laws better. For example, Katie's law, that was passed to get the early DNA done. So this stuff is important, and it shouldn't be just. I didn't suggest Nora's bill. Okay, what happened was Bobby Scherer, who's known me for a number of years, called and said they don't like the bill. How can I make it better? Can you stop by and look at it? That's what really happened. And you know what? I'm not going to refuse to service anybody. I'm there day and night. When the not guilty but mentally ill verdict was going to be repealed, which is really serious because that is the John Hinckley fix. You can look that up online. When John Hinckley got off on his insanity charges, we decided that if you knew what you were doing, that you should be held responsible whether you were mentally ill or not in some criminal way. And that's actually the most liberal of the fixes. And they wanted to get rid of a fix that's rarely used. But the next John Hinckley that comes along, he's not going to have that type of consequences because they're not available anymore. I wrote an 18-page brief on my own time with footnotes, sent it out to our legislatures. We lost by 1 vote in the Senate, which was more conservative than the House. And I'm sorry for that, because I think it's the most serious thing to happen to criminal law since the repeal of the death penalty.
Well, I hope our legislators and potential legislators did not understand my answer to mean that I wouldn't help you if you called me. I certainly would. But the question was, how do you write a bill? You know, that's not our job. Our job is to prosecute cases. But certainly if a legislator called me and wanted my input or my ideas, I would give it to them, absolutely.
Next question goes to Diana first. If your front porch is enclosed and is attached to the house, if an aggressive intruder is threatening you while on the front porch is killed, is the homeowner protected by the Second Amendment of Home Protection? Got it?
Yeah. Another conservative. Okay. You know, unfortunately in this state, we just don't have an absolute right to defend your property. There are laws in other states that do protect such individuals. The home invasion law, you know, but I assume if somebody's coming at the porch, on my porch, and they are armed with a weapon, that they would do me harm, and I do think you have a right to defend yourself in that circumstance. But under New Mexico law, we have to look at whether the person is armed and all of the circumstances surrounding the intrusion of them. There's not an absolute right to kill someone because they invaded your property. That can actually happen in some other states. They've approved that. But in our state, we have a whole self-defense analysis that's kind of a little complicated to get into right now, but that's the analysis that we make. But if they're on your porch and they're threatening you and they're armed with a deadly weapon, then you have the right to use deadly force, in my opinion. Thank you.
The bottom line is if a person is doing something that puts you in fear of your life and you react like a reasonable person would under the circumstances, you're good. Now, just wanted to clear up one thing that was mentioned earlier because there was an implication about the Second Amendment in this question. I was a person who obtained a gun grant. That was a 3-year grant. The purpose of that grant was not to take anybody's guns away. The purpose of the grant was to prosecute gun cases, and that's what we did.
First, this next question goes to Roxanne first. If you claim to have the support of law enforcement, what documentation to support this claim can you provide?
Well, I believe I have support of a lot of law enforcement. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you it's every single law enforcement officer because I don't know that for a fact. But I think if you look at, as far as documentation, people wearing my t-shirt, people coming out to help me with events, my petitions, you will find a lot of law enforcement officers involved there. And I invite you to also look in the yards of your various law enforcement officers around town. There you will find my signs. And ask your law enforcement officers so that you know who they would vote for.
Well, wasn't that her? That was her question.
Oh, no, I'm not going.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the 2 minutes?
If you wanted to go talk, do you have any documentation that was right for both of you guys?
Oh, that was for
Yeah,
both of us?
yeah.
Oh, because you said this is for you, Roxanne.
Oh,
So I
first,
didn't know.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
First.
I was confused. You know, I think that you'll find my signs in law enforcement law yards too, you know, and people know us both and they're going to make their decision. You know, I at the end of the day, you know, I hope they vote for me. But I do have some support of law enforcement. I've never told you I had support of all law enforcement. You know, I have people calling me from Lincoln County and from here, offering their help, their support, putting up signs, helping me out with various things, and I'm sure that she has the same. So, but I don't have any documentation that I brought here today to show you who's supporting me. Quite frankly, the deal is this: at the end of the day, they have to work with whichever of us here is elected. Okay, and I didn't want to put them in a bad position by coming out against a DA that could be elected. At the end of the day, they're going to work with either one of us, because that's what they're going to have to do. Thank you.
Okay, that's actually going to conclude our questions. So we're going to come to closing. Roxanne went first for the opening, so you get to go first for the closing. So
Okay.
you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, I think I'm just going to continue on where I left off, because it seems like 3 minutes is always way too short to me. One of the things I did when I came in is with my business experiences. One of the first days I was in office, when the kids were off from school, we actually had 12 children in our office. So I decided that we were going to shut down what I called the DA daycare. What had happened is I think some employees over time had just taken advantage of the good nature of some of our people that were in charge, and brought their children to work, which is a liability to the state, and not a lot of work happened. I actually had employees get angry with me because they didn't have other daycare options. But, you know, being up here is sometimes not a popular job, but I work for you, you're the taxpayers, and everybody needs to be working. We don't need to have these kids running around in our office. They can come by and visit their parents, you know, when they have another parent with them, and say hi, but not as a regular daycare option. One of the things I want to deal with too is my opponent claims that I don't return phone calls. I'll just ask, is there anyone here in this room who's waiting for a call back that I didn't return? Because I don't know. Okay, Mr. Wilder, and I guess somebody over there. Okay, and I apologize for that. I didn't know that you were waiting for a call that I didn't return. But I really do try to return my calls. Could be that it's on my phone at my office. And so, you know, if I didn't return your call, I apologize. But we have a live person answering the phone because it's so important to me that we have service to the public. We're not like many of the offices I call where they say press this number for an extension. We have a live body up there that does that. I also want to deal with the fact that, you know, I do have the leadership that this office needed. In fact, we have more procedures and protocols in place. So the truth of that, from my perspective, is that, you know, as far as my opponent is concerned, is that she didn't want to be led. She didn't want to not have to continue her cases and get rid of the backlog. In fact, when she did leave our office, she gave me 2 weeks notice for a chief deputy and took a vacation during her last 2 weeks. We have more than 100 years of experience in our office with prosecution experience, so we have plenty of experience in our office. We can evaluate the cases. The cases are actually evaluated when they come in, mostly by a 22-year career prosecutor, so I think we're doing well with that. I'm the only candidate here that I know of that's created any programs in our community. When I worked at the DA's office the first time, I wrote a grant to get a victim advocate for the domestic violence unit and a secretary for that unit because it had no support at that time. That unit's still in place today. I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because I wanted to. We have the gang task force up and running. We have the NET program up and running. So we do a lot of things in the community for education. We did an elder abuse unit so that people can report elder crimes, and we assist law enforcement in that investigation. So those are the things that I've done. Lastly, I'll mention that I was awarded the Women of Merit Award from the Alamogordo Daily News in 2006 for my work in domestic violence, and the National Leadership Award from the Republican Congressional Committee in 2005. So those are some awards that I have. Please vote for me on June 5th, or vote for the best candidate that you think is possible. Thank you all for coming tonight.
I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to people in law enforcement. I've talked to a lot of people in the community. And what I've heard from a lot of those people is that they've had issues with the current office not returning phone calls. Perhaps not just the current district attorney, perhaps other people in the office. I think it's very vitally important for elected officials to be accountable, to be responsive to the public. It's all about accountability. You know, it was really hard for me to leave this office. had nothing to do with not wanting to be led, I can assure you. And I didn't do it lightly. I didn't do it for more money because I have to commute to Las Cruces, and we all know what gas costs. And it's about an hour and 15-minute drive every day, both ways. I left the office because of the work environment. And quite frankly, if you talk to former employees of the office, attorneys, secretaries, investigators, anyone who's left the office, you will hear that the work environment was destructive, not constructive, not conducive, that there was no leadership. And that's the truth about why people have left the office. In fact, one employee filed a lawsuit and obtained a settlement for hostile work environment. Well, it is. It's a matter of public record. You know, and when I left, I did give 2 weeks notice, but I did not take 2 weeks vacation. I was at my desk until after 5 o'clock, my very last day of work. And so I think that I've shown throughout my 20 years as being a prosecutor, dedication above and beyond anything that I was ever paid for. And I keep hearing about this 22-year career prosecutor, and I'm trying to think of who is that. And I just figured out that it's Dave Ceballos, who interestingly enough was hired on the same day that I was, October 15th, 1991. Dave has 20 years of experience. I think that's a little bit more of the exaggeration that you get from the current district attorney. You've heard a lot about programs that have been created. An elder abuse unit, a gang task force, this program, that program. Where is the prosecution of cases? Where are the results from these programs? The job of the district attorney is to prosecute cases. You have a choice on June 5th. Do you want a district attorney with the experience, the know-how, and the ability to successfully lead an office and prosecute cases? Or do you want one who creates programs? I think the choice is clear. And I ask for your vote on June 5th.